One short question. All right, if I could just have one short question.
The administration of the forces versus the administration of the region, those are two entirely separate functions.
Councillor Seglins, you still have the floor.
All right, if I could just have one short question on community policing. I really appreciate the community policing initiatives that I see the regional police force putting forward, and I just wondered if you're getting the numbers in yet to see. I saw the chart saying there's a decrease in motor vehicle accidents, and it's certainly wonderful to see those numbers coming down. I'm sure a lot of it is through the RIDE program. I would wonder, though, if some of it couldn't be contributed to the youth initiatives against drunk driving, the SAD programs, the ADD, SADD, and those kinds of things. Do you see in that age group of young people between 16 and 25 a reduction in their accident levels, in particular related to liquor offenses as well?
I don't have that recent figure in front of me. I understand, however, from statements made at a media conference yesterday on the kickoff of the RIDE program that the problem age cohort has slipped downwards to include those from the age of 16 up to the age of 35, which I would know to be a good figure because it came from the MAD people. But the chronic impaired driver used to be the middle-aged male, around the average age of 45 to 52. So while I think that young people are the chief disciples of anti-drink driving program these days, there still remains large numbers within that cohort that are unconvinced. But a lot of the zeal and the commitment and the effort is coming from young people today, certainly.
Yeah, well, I think those programs and the officers in the schools being a liaison, they're more, it's one with the community, and I think that kind of policing is certainly to be congratulated. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Seglins. Councillor Holden? Well, seeing no further speakers, thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I suppose at this time we should move directly on to the next presentation, which is a review of steel protection. And Deb Troughton, Regional Clerk and Director of Administration, will you like to give your presentation now, please?
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of Management Committee, and residents of Peel. My name is Deborah Troughton. I'm the Regional Clerk, and I am responsible for what we call the Protection Other program. I'm just going to briefly run you through that program. If I can have the lights. You heard briefly the discussion about the OPP contract and to police the residents of Caledon. Protection Other is a $5.4 million budget in terms of spending. 73.5% of that budget is indeed the contract to police Caledon. That is funded by the residents of Caledon. It is under contract, and the contract expires in '93. If you have any questions about that portion, that is primarily a finance department responsibility. The remaining portion of the Protection Other budget excludes OPP, constitutes 26.5% of our expenditures in that area. The services provided are the 911 emergency telephone service, regional emergency measures planning, and the coordination of our fire services amongst the 3 area municipal fire departments. In terms of our funding for this program, the largest portion of the funding, 97.8%, comes from the property taxpayer. A small portion, 2.2%, comes through subsidy from the federal and provincial level of government through the JEP program, which is the Joint Emergency Preparedness Program. We apply for subsidy every year and have been very fortunate to receive some subsidy to help offset the cost of this vital program. In terms of spending in our program, this slide's somewhat complicated, so I'll run you through it rather in detail. There are the two largest expenditures of the Protection Other program are the costs that we pay Bell Canada for the private telephone network for the 911 system, and the salary and wage costs that we pay the police. The Central Answering Bureau for the 911 Emergency Response Service is staffed by and managed by the police department. There's a small portion which is pure salary and wages to pay the cost of the Emergency Measures Planning Officer, who works for us in 1992 2 days per week and does double duty as the region's spill coordinator working for the Public Works Department. Moving along, in 1992 we budgeted for roughly 141,000 calls through the 911 system. That equates to roughly 385 calls per day. We're down, our actual show is down a bit. We'll probably be running about 365 calls per day this year. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we do pay for the equivalent of 10 call takers. We pay that money to the police service who staff that 911 center in conjunction with their own Central Answering Bureau. In addition, there's an advisory committee which manages the 911 system, of which I am chair, comprised of all of the emergency agencies that participate in the 911 service in Peel, that being ambulance, which is a provincial responsibility, OPP, again a provincial responsibility, our own Peel Police Service, the 3 fire departments, as well as a representative from Bell Canada. In addition, with the EMO program, Emergency Measures Planning, there are 39 emergency response agencies in Peel, and this program serves to coordinate those emergency response programs that each of those agencies have, make sure they're coordinated in the event of an emergency, that the response would be effective and efficient. And as I mentioned earlier, we have an employee for 2 days a week this year allotted to that program. The last slide I have to show you are our service levels. The 911 service is provided on a private telephone network, as I mentioned. We pay for a level of service at a level where 1 in 1,000 calls would be blocked. By comparison, those of you with phones in your homes and in your businesses, the service is provided over a public network, and the service level provided over the public network is such that 1 in 100 calls would be blocked. So you can see that through the private network we're providing a very high level of service, which we ought to be, and that is the standard level that's provided by Bell across the province. 99% of the calls are answered within 10 seconds. That is 1 ring cycle. The other percent would come about if we're inundated with a flood of calls reporting essentially the same emergency. So that is a very high service level and service standard provided by our call takers. In addition, of the 39 agencies that I mentioned with emergency plans, we have to date reviewed 50% of those. We know they're up to date and coordinated effectively with our own plan. We've only tested 28%. This program's relatively new, and we hope over the next 1.5 to 2 years to run a mock disaster involving a number of those agencies within the community. That is my presentation.
Thank you, Deb. Are there any questions on the delivery of emergency services? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor Robertson.
My understanding is the region of Peel Police, who we just heard from, are about to initiate a new telephone system that has the potential of coordination of not only their own, but perhaps someday the ambulance services and fire services and others, through the coordination of 911. Do you have any links with the the police and a knowledge of what new technology they're planning to put in and how that would link to the 911?
I am aware that the discussions have commenced, that there have been some meetings to discuss this issue. I'm certainly not involved in those discussions. Our role is to manage the 911 system that provides a direct link for the caller to the emergency response agency. The emergency response agencies themselves have met, is my understanding, to talk about telecommunication links.
Okay. And when we first initiated the 911, the agreements were that the region of Peel would pay the bill on behalf of the users, and there's some discussion at other levels that Bell might be considering passing on those costs to the individual users, or it might just be a dollar a year or something, a dollar a month to the residents, as opposed to over $1 million a year to the region. Can you give us a brief update as to if that is happening and if there's any chance of the region getting a kickback in the year 1993?
Yes, certainly. You are quite correct. Bell Canada has approached the various municipalities across the province of Ontario and in Quebec, offering what they're calling subscriber billing 911. This would see the network portion of the 911 cost, which in our case is around $500,000 a year, actually applied to the subscriber's telephone bill. As of 2 weeks ago, Bell Canada has proposed a 31-cent per month per subscriber fee. That equates to roughly $3 to $4 a year per telephone line. And they have also made a preliminary proposal to us, which we are just analyzing now with our finance department, to see a payment or a buyback of the investment that Peel residents made in the 911 system. We have been discussing this with Bell. I should tell you that we brought them down from 40 cents per month per subscriber to 31. We're looking at those costs very seriously because there are 6 regional municipalities in Ontario that have invested, whose residents have invested in the service, and we want to be fair in terms of the payback, and we also want to be realistic in terms of the fee that is now going to be passed along to the residents. I should point out that this offering by Bell would provide the availability of 911 across the province, but not obligate those of us who do not now have 911 to plug into the system, if I can use some generic terms. So we're concerned about that. We're looking at that very seriously because we will not have an option as one of the regional municipalities whose residents have made the investment in the service.
So
we will still be responsible for staffing and paying for the Central Answering Bureau, and there's some equipment there that we'll still have to pay Bell for on a monthly basis. It helps us run the lines between the Central Answering Bureau and the emergency agency.
So the answer then is there is some money that the Bell might pay us a lump sum payment this year in 93 if we agree?
If we agreed to it, the money would be paid to us late in the last quarter of 1993. The full impact of the savings would affect us in the 1994 operating budget when we see that $500,000 fall off of the tax base.
So we get the savings of not having to pay it, but there'd be a cash settlement as well.
That's correct.
Okay. I thank you very much for your response.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we could then move on to the presentation by Louise Eason, the Finance Department, Treasurer and Commissioner of Finance. Again, for the purposes of anybody tuning into this particular segment, if you have any questions following the presentation that you would like answered, by the members of staff who are here, please telephone your question to the Region of Peel office number 7919400, extension 4582, and your question will be transmitted to us for a response. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of Management Committee. It's a pleasure to appear here before you today with my finance management team to provide information with respect to the services that the Finance Department provides. To my left is Dan Lebrecht, the Director of Financial Planning and Reporting. To his left, Larry Haas, the Regional Internal Auditor. Further left, Russ Kemp, Director of Accounting and Utility Finance, and Roy Wiseman, Director of Systems and Services. The Finance Department provides services in essentially three broad categories. The first being statutory obligations. A couple of examples of these would be filing of audited financial statements on an annual basis. We also act as the long-term borrowing agent for the area municipalities in Peel and the two school boards, in addition to the borrowing program for the region of Peel. The second category of services could be termed support services to council and to internal corporate regional departments. And finally, a series of services that are provided to the general public in the way of direct sewer and water services, meter installation and repair, among them billing for sewer and water services. On a day-to-day basis, the department processes the thousands of transactions that are required to pay the vendors of the region and to collect the revenues that are due to the region for all services of the corporation. And through financial plans that have been adopted by regional council over the last 18 years of regional government, the region established a AAA credit rating in 1977, which it retains to this day on its Canadian-denominated debt. A contributing factor to the credit rating, among others, is the quality and continuity of financial management. And I'm very proud here today to present you with directors who have long-standing service with the region and the in-depth knowledge to carry financial decision-making through. Of the 192 staff in the department, 69 are supported by the water and sewer rates and the balance by the property tax. 6 positions have been held vacant for the past 2 years due to budget constraints, 4 in the property tax division, and the balance of 2 in the utility rate supported functions. I'll refer to the first slide. If I could have the light, please. In addition to the Office of Commissioner, where I share secretary with one of the directors, there are 4 divisions in the department. Beginning with the more traditional finance functions, the first being the Financial Planning and Reporting Division, directed by Dan Lebrecht. This is a group of 30 which manages the corporate budget process and produces financial statements, as well as handling corporate financial arrangements for investments, banking, long-term borrowing. There is an increasing emphasis as well on policy review, as in the case with development charges, and broader statutory authority in areas of debt and investment. Internal audit is a section of 3 staff, led by our internal auditor, Larry Haas. He keeps departments on track by reviewing their financial systems and administrative procedures on a regular basis, reporting results to senior management. Accounting and Utility Finance, directed by Russ Kemp, provides the core financial services such as payroll, accounts payable, and revenue collection, with a tax-supported staff of 29. The rest of the 69 staff in the division are dedicated to running the finance end of the region's sewer and water utilities, including meter installation, repairs, meter reading, as well as the utility billing and revenue collection functions. Finally, in Systems and Services, this division under the direction of Roy Wiseman is a group of 60, which provides a variety of services ranging from computer systems and development for the corporation as a whole, telecommunications services, as well as purchasing, inventory, and a host of other services which Roy will describe in greater detail. Department spending at $16.8 million is 23.8% related to the traditional finance services one expects from a finance department. This 23.8% share, or about $4 million of $16.8 million, breaks into 2% for administration and internal audit, 12% for financial planning and reporting, and 9.8% for accounting-related services. The balance of spending at 76.2%, or $12.8 million, is split fairly equally between systems and services at 39.8%, or about $6.7 million, and the utility finance function at 36.4%, or $6.1 million. The funding for the department reflects the fact that we exist largely to serve other regional functions. So you can see that the largest share at 38.1% is recovered from other departments that use our services. Some external fees, particular to the utility function, amount to 9% of the funding, with the balance of about equally shared between the property tax and the utility rates at 26% each. The categories of expenditure are heavily weighted in the salary and wage area at close to 50%, again reflecting the service nature of our functions. The balance of spending relates to goods and services, required to produce financial services in the case of computer usage and printing, and on the utility side through the acquisition of water meters, with a small 2.7% element for contribution to reserves for equipment replacement. At this point, I'd like to call on Dan Lebrecht to take you through the financial planning and reporting division in greater depth. Dan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I represent 30 people in the financial planning and reporting group, and basically we're operating under 3 different sections: the treasury unit, budgets, and corporate reporting, and then there's the divisional administration. While we do a lot of stuff for pretty well everybody in the organization, some of our key areas that drive our business, I guess the primary one that you're all more familiar with is the budgeting process. We facilitate and coordinate and produce all the paperwork and the analysis that goes into presenting the current estimates, as well as the capital budget and capital forecasts. In all, the region spends somewhere in the range of $700 to $750 million between the current and capital budgets. So big dollars, and we require a lot of analysis to give you the proper information to make those decisions. There are 10 staff that work within that area. The smallest group is the Treasury section, which has 6 complement. Besides doing the corporate banking, one of their biggest, most critical areas is handling of the region's investment portfolios. We manage not only the region's reserves and its general funds, we also handle the sinking funds, which are used to retire debt. And we also handle trust accounts like the Homes for the Aged Residents Trust Fund, as well as Peel Nonprofit Housing funds. All in all, we average around $560 million of investments, which produce somewhere between $40 and $50 million a year of revenue for the corporation. The section also handles the long-term borrowing of the region, the area municipalities, and the school boards. So whereas our debt needs have been going down over the last decade, that isn't the case in, say, the school board. So we're still driven to perform the statutory responsibilities of acting as a registrar and transfer agent for those issues, and currently we have approximately $400 million in debt outstanding in the public sector. The corporate reporting group maintains probably some of the more critical day-to-day functions. They run the systems that generate all the transactions. They ensure that the debits do balance to the credits. A big item that we get involved with is working through with the external auditors to finalize the annual reports that are presented to council and the ratepayers. And those costs are a big part of our kind of non-salary costs. As well, the corporate reporting group ensures that all management information systems are up to speed, and they produce monthly, quarterly, and triannual statements for all management and council. Kind of a final item that's been kind of new in the last couple of years is the development charge policy, and within the budgets group, within the capital section of the budgets group, there's a small unit that is responsible for the management and maintenance of the development charge policy. Okay. Now on the exciting side, our little division costs $2 million a year in gross terms. Approximately 70% of that comes from the property tax base, while 30% is recovered from various capital and I guess other internal users. Approximately a third of that from the utility side and the other 2/3 from tax side, which usually gets some kind of revenue from elsewhere. Now, being, oops, we went too far. Technical difficulties. That's why they give me my numbers to deal with. On the spending side, you can see from the pie chart, the salaries is our major driving force. We have 30 staff. We do carry the odd vacancy to manage our position, but they represent 68% of our total costs. The 32% that's goods and services, of that, 2/3 of it is related to internal charges that we get from other regional departments, including rent, phone, and that kind of thing. Of the remaining 10%, half of that is external audit fees, and then the remaining 5% are the materials and supplies that we use in operating on a day-to-day basis. Key facts. As the treasurer has mentioned, we do have a AAA credit rating, and our unit is charged with trying to keep the credit rating agencies happy as much as we can. The AAA is, I guess there's only about a half a dozen municipalities in Canada that have a AAA, and it's important to note the province of Ontario doesn't have a AAA, so that's unique in itself anymore. As I previously mentioned, we maintain investment portfolios of $561 million right now. One new initiative that we introduced in the budgeting area is an automated budget system, which kind of tied into our micro network that the systems people have developed. And this has facilitated the compilation of all the data that we require for the triannual reports, as well as the actual budget process. Now, on the development charge front, notwithstanding the current economic situation that we're having to working through, we're still collecting in the order of $30 to $35 million a year in development charges, which is an important part of our capital financing needs. On the service level front, it's sometimes a little difficult to keep track of how good a job you do when you're providing service to others, especially when it's more on telephones and that. But some areas that we did just kind of identify for you today include stuff related, say, our financial controls that we've been very proud of. That we have good internal controls, and that has resulted in really no major audit findings in the history of the region of Peel. Besides the internal controls, the overall controls we place on the finances of the corporation allow us to prepare all the statutory reports to the province and to council ahead of any kind of established guideline. So we've never had a problem in delivering the numbers on time. On the investment side, being a big part of our duties, and given that there are many different areas, and I'm talking on a consolidated basis, so it's difficult to say what our total return is on an ongoing basis. But we did do some analysis prior to this meeting and worked out that for the first 3 quarters of the year, our combined investments returned an average of about 8.5% for the year, which when measured against other professional money managers in that kind of sector, being money market and fixed income securities, ranked very high. But we are not staffed with million professional manager. So even with that, that makes it even better. And historically, Peel has always been kind of up in the top 2 or 3 municipalities in the province as far as performance on investments. And these funds end up coming back to the regional budget in one form or another to help keep down the mill rate impact. Now at this point, I'd like to turn over to my friend, Mr. Hawes, the internal auditor.
Wait for the lights to go back down again.
Start talking and he'll...
I think I would like to, if I could have the lights
Would you like
down.
the lights down again? Sure. Lights down. We'll try again. Lights down. The other way. Oh, halfway down. There we go. Okay, Larry, lights down.
Thank you. Excuse me. Today I'd like to share with you a bit about the internal audit operation at the Region of Peel. I'm responsible for directing 2 types of audit service, financial and computer audits and value for money audits. A key focus of our service is on financial and computer systems audits. Examining the flow of money and the use of computers is really interesting. Basically, the finance department is responsible for setting the financial rules for the region to make sure that the $750 million that we spend in a year is collected from all the right sources and is issued correctly. To do this, the region uses a number of powerful computer systems. For example, we have the utility billing system, which is used to collect 160,000 water accounts. We have the waste management system to collect fees for the use of the landfill site. We have the housing system to collect the rent from over 4,000 tenants. On the payment side, we have the payroll system to pay the wages and salaries, the accounts payable system to pay for goods and services, and the social assistance system to pay for social assistance benefits. And our job in this is to check that all these systems were designed well and are working according to laws, according to the rules, the policies, and the procedures set down by the finance department. We do this on a planned basis and occasionally on an emergency basis when management suspects control problems. Some of the credit for the effective internal controls and good management controls mentioned in Dan's presentation all actually belong to internal audit. The second part of our work is value for money audits. This is something that we're just starting. You might be familiar with this type of audit work from the work of the Auditor General of Canada. This is his current report. It's from this book that the media pick out the sensational items that they broadcast in the newspapers, etc. You might have seen it when the report was brought out last week. In fact, if you read the whole report, you'll find out that the Auditor General has a fairly good opinion of the Federal Public Service. The Auditor General spends about 2/3 of his time on this kind of work and about 1/3 of his time on the financial and systems type work. Value for money audits tend to take longer, too, than financial and systems audits because we really have to get to know the business that a particular section is in before we can figure out whether they've used the money and other resources that they have been provided in a prudent and effective manner. As you can see, our funding is all from the property tax base, and that our costs are largely salaries with 10% for goods and services. A few key facts about our operation. There are 3 of us. Pardon me. We are planning to do 14 compliance audits this year. That's the financial and system type audit. And we're auditing for a corporation spending, as Dan says, $750 million. That $566 million is our current expenditures. And we have over 3,800, almost 4,000 employees whose work we might want to evaluate, or the results of whose work we might evaluate from time to time. In regard to service levels, this is our first attempt to do something in the area of service levels. And it's based on the idea that we should look at all the money that comes into the organization as well as all the money that goes out, and look at the results of the work of all the people in the organization. So based on that idea, the region is spending 34 cents on internal audit per $1,000 of total spending. And we have approximately 3/4 of an auditor available to review the work of up to 1,000 people. This data becomes a little more interesting when we compare it to other regions and over a number of years. We've done some surveys that show that we spend slightly less than other regions per 1,000 of gross expenditure and have a little less audit staff per 1,000 employees. Maybe you could consider paying for internal audit a bit like buying insurance. Do you want a feeling that you are well covered for many possible problems, or are you willing to live with a greater level of risk for less cost? Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next presenter, the Director of Accounting and Utility Finance, Russ Kemp.
Thank you. Should we leave the lights down, Russ? Do you have a presentation to go right into? Okay, we'll leave the slide up and the lights down. Go ahead with the first slide, then the lights. Okay, there we are.
This division provides services to both internal and external clients. The first three services on the list, accounts payable, payroll, and general revenues, are the internal accounting services which we provide to other regional departments. The remaining services are supplied directly to the public for the region's water and sewer utility programs. We handle large volumes of paper and of funds and operate under tight and unyielding schedules. Therefore, we tend to be quite production-oriented. I'll briefly explain each service that we provide. With the internal service providers of payroll, accounts payable, and general revenues, we must not only complete the work within tight timelines and accurately, but there is also a strong requirement for control, not only to ensure the safety of the funds of the region, but also to ensure a high confidence level in the integrity of our procedures, which also reflects upon the region. As you will see later, some of the dollar values are large, which reinforces the need for this control. The payroll produces pay for all of the regional departments, including the regional police. A payroll is produced each week and alternates weekly between hourly and salaried staff. It is, of course, important that this output be timely, accurate, and highly controlled. All of the corporate funds for external goods and services flow out through the accounts payable group. Payments must be timely so as not to pay too early, which would deprive us of the use of the funds, and not late so that we maintain our community image as a responsible payer and to take advantage of suppliers' payment discounts. Control here is paramount, and we must ensure that payments are properly authorized and payment amounts and rates are in accordance with contracts and price schedules. Revenues is the other side of the coin. Billing and collection of all receivables of the region, other than the water and sewer bills, is performed by this function. It includes all of the accounts for the residents in our seniors' homes and all billing for the landfill sites. We also control all cash receipting that occurs throughout the region. Another task is the control of the receipts of all grants and claims for funds from the provincial and federal governments. Moving to the water metering and customer services area, they relate to the water and sewer utility and are basically the cash register for the utility. Here again, the volumes tend to be large, and timing and control are significant aspects of service delivery, along with good customer service. There's a natural progression of tasks here. Firstly, we must install the meters, water meters, in all new premises. Following this, the maintenance of the meters is important since they are mechanical devices and subject to wear. It is important that they function accurately. And then regular and accurate meter reading is required in order to determine the water consumption for billing purposes. Following the initial installation of the water meter, the customer services functions take over and establish the new customer on a billing system. Then follows the regular cycle of the billing of all accounts, their maintenance as customers move, response to customer inquiries, the collection from those who are in arrears, and finally, the processing of payments. The funding, the accounting section of our operation derives its funds largely from internal sources, as shown on the left-hand slice of this pie, and also directly from the property tax, which is the small slice on the right, at 5.7%. The utility services are largely supported by utility rates, as shown by the bottom slice, at roughly 58%. And about 19% of the funds are from external sources, such as water connection fees from builders and service charges to water customers. The spending is about evenly split between wages and goods and services. The goods and services expenditures are largely for the purchase of water meter equipment, services from other departments, and data processing services. As mentioned previously, we deal with fairly large numbers. We provide the accounting services with a staff of 29. We will produce about 115,000 paychecks this year, and 92% of our staff will receive their pay via direct bank deposit. While this is a convenience for our clients, it is also a cost saver in the form of labor and printing costs. In addition to producing paychecks, this group also encounters retroactive pay exercises where we must determine the retro pay in the case of pay equity decisions which are handed down well after the fact, and also where collective bargaining agreements are signed after the old contract has expired. These are very intensive, complex, and time-critical exercises, and we rely heavily on the use of personal computers to accomplish this task. We will complete about 16 of these exercises this year. About 111,000 supplier invoices will be processed this year, and $460 million dispersed through the accounts payable group. The utility finance section comprises 69 staff. The volume of meter installations is a direct reflection of the level of building activity. We budgeted for the installation of 4,300 meters this year, and will probably exceed that slightly. This will be about the same level as 1990 and 1991. We will perform maintenance work on about 14,000 water meters, and we have about 162,000 accounts that we bill on our billing system. The 99.9% metered statistic is a significant achievement when compared to other municipalities. Metering effectively encourages water conservation, and it provides equity among customers. These are just a few of the many statistics we use to monitor our operations. The 16,000 invoices per clerk relates to the payment of supplier invoices. The utility calls per clerk are incoming telephone calls from water and sewer customers. When we look at the past few years for each of these indicators, almost every year has seen an improvement in productivity. Some have seen large jumps due to the introduction of new technology, and others have been gradual, representing continued efforts at refining our procedures. Thank you. The next speaker will be Roy Wiseman, Director of Systems and Services.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Russ. Madam Chair. Systems and Services is not a traditional finance function, so a lot of the services I'm going to describe for you are not those that you would perhaps associate at first glance with the Finance Department. They are provided through my division and through the Finance Department at the Region of Peel. Our services tend to be grouped under three primary headings. The first is to provide a systems and technology function for the organization as a whole. We provide and support the systems and the related technologies that are used by all departments in the corporation. Our second major heading is a purchasing and materials function. We effectively act as the purchasing agent for the region. All goods and services that are bought for the region are bought through the purchasing section of my division. And finally, we provide a number of direct services, including switchboard operation, inventory, printing, photocopying, internal mail, and courier between various regional facilities. I'll describe each of those in a little more detail for you. Under the Systems and Technology heading, we develop and support the computer applications, including payroll, water billing, accounting, social assistance, housing, landfill, a lot of the traditional applications, both finance and non-finance, that you would come to expect in a large corporation. I think more recently, over the last 2 to 3 years, we are also finding that a lot of our computer systems work is to support generic office functions, provide capabilities such as text retrieval, automated budgeting, integrating the budgeting process into spreadsheet type tools, etc., so that it is less now driven to providing specific applications for a given user function and more general tools and solutions that are applicable across the whole corporation. For the corporate computer systems, we provide a computer operations function. This includes things like ensuring that we have backup of all of the data and the systems, control over system security. We print something in the order of 120 million print lines annually, too much in my opinion. And generally we ensure that the corporation's computer processing runs properly and according to established schedules. We support a network of 350 computer terminals used in all departments. Users of these terminals are entering something like 50,000 online computer transactions every day of the year. We provide and support the region's advanced office automation environment, which provides such tools to our user community as electronic mail, group scheduling, word processing, text search and retrieval, spreadsheets, graphics, project management tools. They're all running on a corporate, local, and wide area network. We coordinate the region's involvement in geographic information systems, including cooperation with the 3 area municipalities and the hydro commissions to ensure that data collection and data maintenance within the region for what is called computerized mapping is done only once. We provide central management of all computer resources used by the corporation so that we have well-established hardware and software standards across the whole organization rather than a number of different and incompatible products, which is unfortunately quite often the case in other organizations. We provide classroom training for our user community, and that includes a help desk operation where all users can call in and get answers to specific questions or problems that they have. Our goal there is to make sure that our users can use the microcomputer-based tools effectively. Also included under the systems and technology function are the telephone systems used by the corporation. In the past, our involvement with telephone systems has been primarily with the head office. Increasingly, however, we are finding ourselves involved in the analysis of telephone system requirements for satellite offices. In the last year, we installed new systems in each of our social assistance locations. In the 2 years prior to that, in the health department. And the requirements for telephone systems, I'm sure you have all seen, are becoming more sophisticated as time passes, so that they are less to be taken for granted, I think, as part of a corporate technology solution. Also, within the last few months, you will have heard about the deregulation of telephone long distance. And I think that that change will provide opportunities for the region as a corporation, which is again going to imply central management of long distance resources rather than, again, accepting long distance charges as a given within the, each unit of the organization. And finally, we manage a lot of other communications-related technologies used by the organization: fax machines, cellular phones, pagers, photocopiers, all of that stuff that we assist in the acquisition of for using departments, establish standards, and ensure that we have proper maintenance of the equipment. For the purchasing and materials function, we manage the acquisition of all the goods and services used by the region. I think our purchasing staff know where to get the right products for the right price, and they know the process to be followed to ensure that we find the right balance between effectiveness for our corporation and fair and open competition in the marketplace. And that's not an easy balance to find. More recently, their purchasing staff have been working with staff from Waste Management to factor in another element in purchasing decisions. These are environmental factors. And I think that we have probably shown some leadership that in terms of the municipal sector in fully integrating the operation of purchasing and waste management to make sure that we have a common voice on waste management issues as they affect purchasing decisions. We've also been working with our counterparts in the area municipalities and the school boards to form a regional cooperative purchasing group. This group is addressing joint requests for tenders on major commodities where we can assure some commonality of standards. This is not purchasing everything that we buy, but there are certain commodities where us forming a group will provide advantages for all. And finally, our inventory service has managed an inventory of parts historically for the Public Works operations function. This is really parts for our water and sewer system. But more recently, that operation has expanded to stock common products used by all regional departments, janitorial products, hardware items, and as a result, individual departments don't have to maintain their own mini inventory, or they don't have to initiate hundreds of purchase orders through the year as they need to replenish their supplies. And finally, our service function includes operating a central print shop that produces over 11 million impressions annually on our printing presses, high-speed copiers, and convenience copiers. We coordinate internal mail delivery within 10 Peel Centre Drive and to and from Canada Post, and we coordinate the courier service between more than 30 regional facilities, including stops at all 3 area municipal offices. And we operate the region central switchboard serving our headquarters facilities. In terms of our funding, it is primarily funded by internal fees, approximately 70%. That means that our using departments are paying for the services that we provide. The remaining 30% is really accounted for by certain services that are not easily allocated to given using departments, and I would use internal mail delivery as an example. We could arbitrarily allocate the cost for that service, but in fact it is a service that is not recharged. Our expenditures are in the order of $7.5 million, which in fact seems high until you realize that we are purchasing through my division all of the technology essentially that is used by the regional corporation. So what you are seeing here is a corporate expense rather than the expense for the division. Accordingly, and unlike the other divisions that have spoken most recently, our division is not primarily salary and wage driven. Our salary and wage cost is only 39% of our total expenditure. The large slice on the bottom of that particular slide relates to the goods and services that we purchase on behalf of the regional corporation. And there is a fairly significant slice in there at about 2 o'clock, which relates to contribution to reserve. 6% of that $7 million expenditure, in fact, is contributed to reserve. This ensures that it's effectively a savings plan, and it ensures that we are putting away the money each year to replace the technology in the organization as it wears out or as it effectively becomes obsolete or no longer suited to the task at hand. A few key facts. We have over 600 microcomputers in the organization. More than 400 of those microcomputers are connected to the corporate computer network. The exceptions are microcomputers that are used in area offices outside our 2 headquarters facilities, and we would certainly like to address those locations in the next 1 to 2 years. There are also 350 computer terminals, 24 telephone systems in use at our various facilities, more than 1,500 telephone sets. We purchase more than $70 million worth of goods and services annually, and that works out to a little over $10 million for each analyst or buyer within our purchasing section. Some other indicators of our service volumes include more than 1 million computer transactions per month, almost 1 million print shop impressions produced per month within either our central print shop or on our convenience copiers. We take 65,000 telephone calls per month coming through our telephone switchboard, serving our headquarters facilities. To relate some of these statistics to service levels, with our 600 microcomputers, 350 computer terminals, we've now got about 1 computer or terminal for every 4 members of regional staff. So the region is in fact a highly automated organization, and I will argue a highly effective organization, partly because of some of the tools that we have been able to make available. Unfortunately, this ratio is increasing the pressures on our support staff, so that we now have something on the order of 34 computer users for every member of system staff. As recently as 1989, that ratio was 11 to 1. I believe we are still providing effective support services for user departments with those ratios. In terms of some of the other indicators shown here, our purchasing operation costs us less than 1% of the value of the goods and services that we purchase. And I think it is fairly clear, and I have seen consistent examples of this through the years, that we're able to achieve far better than 1% in savings through the application of the specialized skills of the purchasing group. Similarly, we continue to keep our cost per print shop or convenience copy impression. You'll see here 3.5 cents for the print shop impression, 3.1 on our convenience copiers. Those are below competitive market rates. In other words, our cost of the internal service, which is fully loaded, includes all overheads, is cheaper than if we were able to buy that, or if we chose to buy that service from outside. And finally, in terms of our switchboard operators, we handle about 140 calls every hour. This works out to about 1 phone call for every 25 seconds. And during peak periods, it's about 1 call per operator for every 15 seconds. And that concludes my presentation. I think, Louise, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. We have a list of speakers that have indicated they wish to ask questions of this particular session that we're having, and I'm pleased to announce that due to the interest in the city of Mississauga, they've opted not to cut off live program coverage at 3. They're sticking with us. You see the enthusiasm in Mississauga. They don't want to be left behind, of course. We will now be live till 5 p.m. if that answers Councillor Seguin's question. Councillor Bissell.
I have a number of questions. Probably Louise, you can answer me on the pay equity issue. How far are we getting along in integrating all the pay equity into the system? And is this our last year that we're going to be in that?
Madam Chair, I have some information for you, but I believe the detailed information on that topic can come from our Human Resources Director, who will be making a presentation later today. We have posted more than one plan. We have paid out some 1990 and 91, I believe, Russ, payouts to date, and there are some payments pending by about Christmas time or a little later this year. We expect to post the last plans shortly, and we feel that this may be the last year for budget impact, but we can't promise that at this stage in the process.
So it's still a consideration for the 1993 budget then?
Potential minor impact in 1993.
Okay, and I understand through one of the gentlemen who spoke that the departments, are they putting their proposed budgets on a computer system that you're able to pick up? Is that the way it's working, or are they having to still do all the put it all on a separate budget items onto their own budget and bring it all to you to be collated, or how's it working this year?
Well, it's not 100% automated throughout every department, but as Roy mentioned, we have quite a quota of microcomputers throughout the regional corporation now. And at a minimum, we have computers on the desks of all the financial managers within each department, at police, in the various social services offices, etc. There is the facility in each and every department to put the numbers into a Lotus-based spreadsheet, and twice per week load those spreadsheets into the mainframe computer and receive about 2-day turnaround in reports that get refreshed with fresh cost estimates for their own management meetings internally within their departments.
So then they're able to work on the budgets and get it back to you.
Very much so. There's also additional features within that system to provide for variance comments on the spreadsheet and emailed messages among supervisors, etc. It is really a watershed in budget preparation here at the region.
There's a question that actually Councillor Whitehead asked the police earlier in their budget. When we're being driven so much by welfare and the police budget, are we asking our managers of each department to look at cutbacks this year in general, or are we going to have they got a guideline that they're going to is zero their guideline, or is minus 2 their guideline, so that things will look at budget time when they finish their budgets in January, February, will they be under their limit from this year, or how's it going to work?
The budget instructions that have been sent out to every department have been religiously similar in all cases, to the extent where we have asked departments to estimate the status quo level of service delivery. What would it cost if we weren't to reduce levels of service as you're being presented here today, Madam Chair? In addition to that, however, departments have been asked to provide a list in priority ranking of what would be required to reduce the level of spending to a 0% increase over the prior year. What would be the manager's choice in what would go first and what would go last?
And will this subcommittee see that as time goes on into January's meetings?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Emil, you had some.
Just a question I was going to ask of the Commissioner in regards to the first question that Councillor Bissell asked. I'd noted that I'd heard rumors that the province may not introduce pay equity because they may not be able to afford it now. So I wondered how we were going to justify to the taxpayers sort of a double standard, if you like, in this country, where they directed municipalities to proceed with pay equity, and yet may have to choose not to proceed in their own departments with pay equity.
I'll defer to our CAO.
Perhaps I can try that. I think what the province has said, if I understand it correctly, is first of all, they have implemented pay equity for their line departments. What they've said as for the extended public sector, such as boards and commissions, hospitals, for example, which relate to us in our nursing program, they have not extended it to those organizations. But within their directly controlled ministries, they have and are implementing pay equity, as are we, as part of the original legislative direction. But they're slowing down by, I believe it's 2 years, the implementation time frame for what's called the other public sector. I'm not sure I'm using the correct terminology, but other special purpose bodies that have significant programs, such as hospitals.
Okay. Councillor Holden, and then Mayor Roberts.
I had a question as it relates to coordination between the municipalities and specifically with Caledon. We're going through looking at some software and whatnot, some new computer work. And both from a standpoint of utilizing the buying power of the region as well as coordination of systems as it relates to the ongoing aspect of being able to plug into one another. Is there a committee or a means of structuring, and I have a part of the answer myself, but I'm doing this again once for the audience to recognize that as municipalities we are trying to work together in some ways of streamlining, but maybe you could give a much clearer definition of what is going on and what can be taking place between the municipalities.
Yes, there is a lot going on many different levels in many different committee structures. I'd ask Roy Wiseman to speak to that issue.
Thank you, Louise. I think as it relates to purchasing, I've already mentioned that there is a cooperative purchasing group that has been in place now for something over a year. I think it has been very effective. We are able to identify common commodities and issue a joint tender for those commodities. And in each case, various municipalities will see different levels of savings. And it really depends on what the combined purchasing volumes, how they relate to your individual purchasing volumes. And to take one example, if we were looking at something like computer paper or photocopy paper, the Region of Peel's usage, as large as they were when I described them previously, are dwarfed by the usage of the school boards. So the school boards would probably have seen very little savings in their cost per copy, but we would have in fact seen a much better level of savings. There will be other situations which will be reversed, where they will in fact be able to piggyback on the kinds of benefits we get. I think beyond that, beyond the sort of obvious application of cooperative purchasing, you get the benefits of purchasing staff exchanging ideas with each other. And none of us are experts in everything. And what we find out is that somebody from one of the other agencies can contribute some ideas or knowledge to a particular purchasing area that we haven't thought of before. And I think that we are benefiting as well from those informal exchanges as much as we are from the direct dollar savings on the particular tenders. Even in terms of the procedures, how we go about doing things. There's an initiative underway right now to look at something like a common purchasing bylaw, which we would see as a benefit to the vendors within the regional community, as something where they could understand the rules rather than having to figure out, well, I know that's the rule at the region, but what's the rule at the city? These things are evolving, I think, fairly gradually. In relation to the systems front, there is interagency cooperation, specifically on the order of geographic information systems. That's been in place for now a number of years. There are some significant expenditures being undertaken within the Region of Peel to collect mapping data. And as I've said previously, one of our basic philosophies is that those dollars should be spent only once. That it really doesn't matter whether the contract and the effort is managed at the area municipal level or the regional level. That's perhaps a lesser concern than the fact that it should be managed once and that data will be made available to all agencies. And that is in fact exactly what's happening in that area. I do talk to my counterparts at the area municipalities on more general systems issues, but there is not, to answer your question specifically, a inter-regional agency systems coordinating committee, or however you might refer to that. I should say, by the way, that there is in fact province-wide cooperation of municipal systems functions through an organization called the Municipal Information Systems Association, and I'm in fact the president of that association.
Madam Chairman, if I may, thank you very much for a very thorough report. And as I said, I asked this question primarily for the public. I think one of the major problems most of us have representing and sometimes trying to explain why we have regional government is that the reason the region government was formed was to try to be more efficient in doing things and less duplication. I guess now that we're in tougher times, people are more focused than ever before and are recognizing the necessity for us to look down every avenue. I would encourage this council and staff to seize the opportunity to educate the public at large, as well as looking for new ways of doing things that may have been more difficult to do before, because in good times we have a tendency to go off and do our own thing. I think there's a lot of avenues that we know we have to come up with new modern methods, be more innovative, and the public is demanding that we be much more focused, as the case may be, on purchasing and duplication of services. I think if we are going to make the image and the perception change of the general public, it's in areas of this nature that we have an opportunity to do that. And I encourage staffs of all the municipalities and the region, obviously, as well as the members of council, to see that we try to do that. And maybe that might be one of the things we could use as a stick, and we can find which carrot we want to use to how to get it there. And in some ways, maybe this is a program we should implement this year a little closer, because I know there's a lot of major capital costs coming up that are once-in-a-lifetime type of thing that we're getting into, such as the software and that. But I think there's other areas as well that the public is saying they see duplication elsewhere, and I think we have an opportunity to overcome some of that, Madam Chairman. So thank you very much for the report, and I throw the challenge back to staff to come back with some suggestions as to how we can get off.
Thank you, Councillor Holden. Mayor Robertson?
Thank you. Over the years on regional council, I've grown to respect what it is the finance department does at the region, and I just thought I'd start out my questions that way, because I do respect their talent and power. A number of questions, some for the public, some for myself. Russ, recently there was a water and sewer slight increase announced for, I think, starting January 1st. And the question that the public asked me on Sunday night was, why do we need to increase this year the cost of services of water and sewer?
The basic reason is the costs driving the function have increased this year. The increases could have been greater, except there have been cutbacks or efficiencies achieved within the functions, within the finance department and in public works.
The question might not be as fair to you as maybe Don Markle if he were here, but is there a sort of a capital expansion of a particular plant that you're aware of, or Mike Garrett is aware of, that is going to require our funds to go to a capital expansion, or is it because hydro rates have gone up and that drives in some way water and sewer?
Madam Chair, perhaps the question is better directed in my direction. We did prepare a report to Regional Council through the Budget Subcommittee recommending an average increase in sewer and water rates of 1.5%. That was adopted by Regional Council last week. That's 1.7% on the water rates and 1.4% on the sewer rate. That is a rate that results from a blended forecast, partially finance costs with respect to sewer and water meter installation and billing costs, etc., largely public works related costs, both at the region and at the Ministry of the Environment for the South Peel sewer and water system. And the rates aren't struck on an individual year basis. There's a long-term forecast that's compiled. We try as best we can to foresee the unknown, and we know that things are moving in directions that we will have to react to. For example, the Ministry of the Environment will be adding an overhead charge for their head office cost at St. Clair Avenue in Toronto, and that will be another $1.6 million in 1993-94 Ministry fiscal year. We have to prepare to be able to absorb that in our rates without a one-year hit. So those sorts of impacts are built into the forecast, and while in an individual year it might be possible to keep the rates to zero, we don't feel, and Budget Subcommittee in turn did not feel, that that was a good long-term decision in the region's interests, given the pressures that we foresee in the next few years.
Okay. I guess if you dealt it with the questions at the level we are asked them, I guess the old-time person who's been paying for water and sewer over the years, last 10 years, wonders why, if indeed there is expansion, those expansion charges aren't passed on to the new customer or through the development levies instead. I should have known, but I didn't recall this $1.6 million new cost from the province that was going to be passed along. That explains part of it, but maybe gives us motivation to break away from the province and run it ourselves.
Yes, there will be a study to that effect coming forward in the next 6 months to a year.
The second question, maybe Debbie, this is, sorry, Louise, this might be best for you, is although the chart said earlier that our AAA rating has been maintained at the region, there was an announcement in the paper that some change occurred. Can you detail, if you could, what change in fact has occurred with our AAA rating?
Yes, Madam Chair. In the last month and a half, Standard & Poor's, located in New York, has reviewed the credit of the federal government in Canada. And in view of deficits and foreign debt levels, there was a slight downgrade of the federal credit rating. The policy of Standard & Poor's, and indeed of Moody's in New York, is that the credit rating of any lower level government in Canada cannot exceed the credit rating of the sovereign level. And while Standard & Poor's has downgraded Canada, that has resulted in 1%, less than 1% of the region's debt, which is still U.S. debt outstanding, being slightly downgraded by New York-based credit rating agencies. That debt will mature in fairly short order, and again, 100% of our debt will be AAA, provided we don't issue outside of Canada in other than Canadian currency. We are AAA.
Okay, thank you. Question perhaps to Larry. Can you explain how your relationship as an internal auditor works, in that to the public, or to me, it seems as though you're reporting to Louise and internally to Michael Garrett, and so it doesn't seem to me that you have a freedom to be critical. That if you say something bad internally, one of them will come down on you and say you better hide it so that it doesn't look so bad, without any reflection on them. How could we get a more independent auditing reporting function, or in your judgment, is that still working reasonably good?
I think it still works reasonably good. Internal audit is really designed to be a service to management, and I report at the highest levels of management, so within the organization I don't have any independence problems. The only, I guess, other level that is in place in some places is an audit committee or some kind of reporting to committee. And that's something that we have been discussing internally, and something may go ahead with that. Maybe Louise could comment further.
So if you reported directly to council, for example, if you were an employee of council and not of the administration, would that, could that possibly give us a more aggressive report from the auditor?
In the places where they have that, and it's called the Auditor General style of operation.
That's what I'm referring to.
You get a more aggressive audit. You definitely do.
Okay. Did you want to comment on that, Louise, or is it too political?
Perhaps I could just add that Larry Hawes is so independent that he has the treasurer shaking in her boots. So I don't think we can hold Larry back from saying what's on his mind.
Good. Michael?
Maybe I can comment. I like to use internal audit very effectively in the work that we do, and Larry and his group provide a very essential role. I don't think it should be confused with the external auditor. However, the external auditor comes in and has a look at our processes and our financial controls to make sure that we're operating as in a manner that's satisfactory, more than satisfactory, that's excellent. And Larry, in fact, feeds into that system. If there was something grossly wrong, the external auditor's job is to pick that up. That's what they're hired to do, is to report to council, and in fact they report to council once a year in doing that. But reviewing whether or not it's useful to have an audit committee and looking at the nature of the auditing function is something that we can do. I have no objection to that. In fact, this year we've between us, Larry, we've started a couple of additional comprehensive audits in some areas that we had some sensitivity for, and we expect to be able to implement the answers that come out of that in the operations of those departments. So it's a useful management tool internally right now, and we're using it aggressively already. I would think where you have a more diffuse system, like the federal government or the provincial system, having some familiarity with both of those, having an auditor general type of approach is most essential because of the distance between the legislatures and the operating departments. So you may want to consider it because there's costs attached to doing that, Madam Chair. Sorry.
Okay. Next question perhaps involves Michael, but hopefully the others would take it to heart. I started out by saying the respect I hold for the power and the ability of the finance people at the region. And in this year when we're looking at disentanglement, is there any function that you are presently providing at the region in the finance department that could be provided you could provide that same service for an area municipality like Brampton, or the police, or Children's Aid, that would in fact be more efficient than the way we're doing it now? My understanding, for example, is that the city has the same kind of functions to perform that you are doing, but do you have the capability, or with a slight upgrade, could you offer a service, or are you offering a service to the police, to the Children's Aid, to the City of Brampton, that we might explore with you in this time of disentanglement?
I could start off, Madam Chair, and I'm sure that I will miss details that my directors will fill in for me, but the services that are provided today are in large measure shared with others. We do provide a system for salary projection to the police for preparation of their budgets. They are linked into our Peel automated budgeting system for budget preparation of worksheets. They have cloned, you might say, our financial control bylaw. There are a lot of measures that have been taken first at the region and adopted by police in a measure of cooperation over the years. There are other services, for example, in investments. Peel Nonprofit Housing does not manage its own portfolio. of cash on hand. That's done within Treasury under Dan Albrecht's direction, and it works very well that way. We've reviewed it this year with the new bank account being attributed to Peel Nonprofit for the first time, and the decision was made to leave that investment management portfolio with the region. In Roy's area, there are a number of services that perhaps need a fresh look in this disentanglement area. Computers, purchasing, print shop all come to mind. They're, as Roy's stats indicate, they're efficiently managed here. Perhaps there is room for greater efficiency. Roy, would you like to add to that?
Yes, thanks, Louise. I agree with you. I think there are opportunities, and I think that the economic times demand that we explore those opportunities. And some of the ones you mentioned are, in some ways, some of the higher profile services, if you like. But you can perhaps start with some of the smaller services. You can look at something like outgoing mail, our use of specialized equipment for inserting and getting mail out of the building. We all do it ourselves, the City of Brampton, City of Mississauga, and there's potential for cooperation rather than us each having expensive equipment. Another one that comes to my mind is, in fact, courier service. I mentioned that we service 30 regional facilities, and our courier service has to stop at all 3 area municipalities because of the exchange of material between the regional and area level. In all honesty, I don't know what kind of courier operations are being operated at the area municipal level, primarily Brampton and Mississauga, I would believe. But I would suspect if we looked at an integrated courier service, there might be opportunities. And I think that we have to go across our whole range of services and ask ourselves exactly those questions.
I'm going to just jump in at this point with a comment that if we're expecting the image of the region to be one of a leadership position, I think that those kind of reports have to be initiated from the region. If the directors of your department, Louise, are capable of seeing cost savings that way, they might be shy to put it forward to their counterparts at the area municipalities for fear that, just for fear that somebody might lose their job or whatever those perceptions are. And somehow I think we need to encourage you, the directors at that level, to start initiating those kind of reports and suggestions so that they get up to the council table so that we can start talking about it. So far, we've just narrowly focused on waste management as the area to cooperate, and unless we get some other bubble up activities coming, it might not serve us as well with the public as if we had a whole lot of initiatives that we were demonstrating to the public just how cooperative we are. The last question, I guess, perhaps to Michael Garrett or to Roy. It seems in the workplace more and more with microcomputers, work is occurring at home. The need for a central office for, say, an insurance company might not be as needed as if we trust the employee to do some of that work at home if they have their terminal there. Are there any experiments planned or presently going where the region is going to indeed place a terminal in someone's home and say, stay home for 2 days out of 5, so that you get your work done there and simply tell us what you're doing through the computer reporting system and that, because it might have a tremendous savings to just finding space for you in a new building or whatever.
I just respond quickly to that. I think that's an excellent idea. It's not entirely new. Telecommuting is something that we want to look at, and in fact, we had a person into our senior management meeting the other day talking about space standards, and one of the things that we have to take into account is how many people actually have to work out of the office, and we're going to be having a close look at that over the next few months. to determine whether or not there are certain positions within the region where that can happen. And where it can happen, it's in our definite financial interest to do that because we don't have to accommodate them, and we can save funding in that regard. So that's something that I think is a good idea. And over the next 6 months or so, we've targeted ourselves until next fall. We'll look at that and see what opportunities there are.
Thank you.
We'll make this available to you. This is in Forge Magazine. This is not a new story, but it's a very comprehensive background of exactly what you're talking about. And it was in last week's Sports Magazine. It was faxed to me on the weekend from a friend of mine. Ironically, it's right on the button with what you're talking about. And I will make this available to council and the rest of the...
If indeed the investment, the return on the investment is 8.57 at your department, you have that talent this year. If you compared that to what the city of Brampton's doing, or Mississauga, or whoever else invests money, and you came out as consistently better, maybe this is a function that you could offer to the area municipalities, and again in the spirit of looking for what are your strengths, bragging a little bit about them, and then seeing if some of the area municipalities would take you up on your offer to invest the money on our behalf, or maybe vice versa. Maybe Brampton's doing it better than the region, and we could invest your money. But I think those new kinds of thoughts have to be thought and shared with each other if we really are going to impress our public. The last question, I noticed in one of the presentations that in order to make a tradition you've fallen into, and the city has too, is to recover your many costs internally. So you bill everybody internally for your costs, and I guess that way is a traditional thing that's grown up. And I'm wondering, is that a cost-effective way of doing it? It does put the responsibility on the person, quotes, buying the service, not to ask for too much, because they have to pay the bill. But all the paperwork that is involved in keeping track and transferring the costs, and you must have a whole lot of people on staff just running around internal paper. In the city of Brampton,
Louis Jason has an answer for you.
in the city of Brampton, we do that, and it always puzzles me. Why do we charge somebody for using a vehicle out of the vehicle department? Wouldn't it be far better if we just gave it a wash and saved all that paperwork?
Madam Chair, there is some administrative overhead involved in allocating these costs, but we feel, excuse me, the benefits far outweigh the costs. At the region in particular, since there's so many programs that are cost shared by the province, it's very important to identify the costs that are subsidizable and attribute them in the appropriate program area in order to obtain subsidy. Also on the sewer and water rate, many of the services provided to the sewer and water programs are provided by tax-supported programs. It's important to get those costs off the tax bill and onto the sewer and water bill in that way. We don't internally charge 100% of all services. If a service is provided by one tax-supported program to another tax-supported program, in the main, we don't charge that out. There could be benefits to full cost allocation, and we're looking at that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, staff, for your responses. I look forward to...
Thank you. Mr. Garrett, would you like to introduce the next? I think we're out of questions, so we may move on to the next department. You're not on here.
Talk to the chairperson twice about it. I pushed this one twice.
Well, your light's not on and you've not been queued. Second takes it off. You want on? Just for a moment? Okay, let me find you. There you go. You're on. You got 30 seconds.
Well, if I have 30 seconds,
We're going on to the next, administration, can you ask the questions in that section,
no,
or
I
is
don't
it all
have
to do
questions
with
of
this?
administration, I have questions of finance, but if I
There you
have
go.
30 seconds, it's a waste of
I was
time.
teasing you, go ahead. We do not want to be here past 5 o'clock, though, Mr. Whitehead, please.
Madam Chairman, in response to a couple of questions that the mayor raised on utility costs, I just wanted to state that one of the advantages to putting an increase on the utility charge rather than subsidizing it through tax-supported means is that the user can regulate the amount of, for instance, water they use, and in that sense control themselves the amount of money they'll pay. If it's put on the tax bill, there is no way that the taxpayer can avoid paying the taxes short of selling their property. So that brings me to a question. Is any part of the utility program supported through tax dollars?
Yeah, but it's never been on again.
Madam Chair, I think the short answer is no. To our knowledge, there aren't any major costs that are not fully recovered through the utility bill.
I think it might be worth the exercise, Madam Chairman, to determine what, if any, costs there are, so that we can at least consider moving those costs, should they exist, to the utility tax bill, away from the property taxes, for the reasons I just stated. I think there is also quite a difference between user fees in any capacity of service and tax support through the property taxes. So the next question I have are there any user-related costs of the region that are not totally covered by the user? For instance, I'm thinking of the Land Division Committee.
Yes, Madam Chair, that is an issue that was recently debated at Regional Council, and I believe in that case the present rate does not fully recover the cost.
Again, Madam Chairman, I think it would be a useful exercise if the Region Appeal was able to determine where the shortfalls lie in user fees related to the costs, how much they are, and whether or not it's possible to shift most, if not all, of those additional costs towards the user fee and away from the property tax bills. I'm saying this because, as Chairman Cole brightly pointed out when I was on the phone for a few moments, the province is engaging in serious downloading to us as a municipality, and we have to try to manage property taxes. And there are different ways we can manage it. One of the ways is just simply to cancel services, or to tell the province that we're not prepared to pay their shot. And we may do some of that, and I hope we will. But another way is to cleanse the tax bill so that we're not using property taxes to support in any way utility costs or other types of user fees. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
No other speakers, we'll move on to Mr. Garrett. Unless, did you want to say something, Mr.?
Well, there are, if I may, Madam Chairman, there are some areas I'm sure that we still have concern about, as I received a letter just yesterday, and for example, the septic tank application forms. I'm not sure whether the province is now looking at an administration cost for their side of it or not, but that's sort of another area that could be looked at. So there certainly are some areas that could be reviewed over the next few months in that area that I'm aware of.
Just to add, Madam Chairman, to that, we are going to look at the fees in the planning department for subdivision approvals, because that's one area, one of the largest areas that we've had some discussion about, and I think you're aware of it, is the whole area of waste management, but it's fraught with some difficulty in terms of applying user fees to that. Garbage by the bag has a disposal, a gutter problem, so to speak.
Mr. Garrett, just a question on that issue then. If you're talking recovering fees, What happens with people who are holding back taxes, or are we looking into, I think one of the other cities is prosecuting all past tax people who are holding back on taxes?
We're in the fortunate position of the region of not having that problem because we levy the area municipalities who have the responsibility for tax collection. So whatever we determine, you determine at the region as the levy, it's levied on the 3 area municipalities, and they have the responsibility for collecting the taxes.
And if someone refuses just to pay their regional taxes and sends that in a letter, the city is not putting that back on the region?
No, the city has a responsibility to pay the levy.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Madam Chairman, that was the only question I was going to ask in this section. Pardon?
Push your green button.
That was the only question I was going to ask in this section, so if the viewers are watching, so don't lose the thread, if I could ask it now.
Go. But Mr. Garrett might be able to help you anyway.
Well, he was the one I was going to ask the question. As you just related, it's the local area municipalities are the tax collector for the region themselves and the Board of Education. The region is approximately 13% of the tax bill, depends on the municipality. The Board of Education is approximately 65%, and the local area municipality is approximately 22%. These are the Caledon figures that I'm quoting. And as you rightly stated, the municipality has to remit to the region and the Board of Education the levy, whether they're capable of collecting it or not. 2 questions. One is, if the region is getting 13% of the revenue derived from property taxes, how much of the cost of collecting, billing and collecting those taxes by the local area municipality is supported by the region?
I'd have to defer to Louise for this. Louise, do you have an answer to that?
Madam Chair, the way the tax system works at present, the city and town collect the taxes and remit to the region's share of that payment the following business day. There is no admin overhead charge at present for that tax collection service.
So it should be noted then that the municipalities bear 100% of the cost of collecting and remitting the taxes for themselves, the region, and the Board of Education.
If I may, Madam Chairman, one of the discussions earlier back in regards to this particular issue was whether or not the region should collect on behalf of all of the 3 area municipality, and whether that would be more cost effective to do it. So I think, as it may be today, if region decide or the council decide that it can be more cost effectively done by one agency doing it, I guess we would put the same terms in the other way if you like. So I think that even though the points are very valid today, that's what the law is, and the tables may be reversed in the future if we can find that it may be more cost effective to do it. I don't think the standards, though, of course, would change that, or the interest rate might change on the penalty, or the way of collecting in the long term may change in the course of action. So I think you got to keep that in mind when you're having this as a discussion.
I think, Madam Chairman, there are 2 issues here. One is, rightly as Chairman Kolb is saying, someone else might eventually collect the tax. That's the one issue. The other issue is, I believe that everybody should pay their share of the cost, whoever collects it for them. That's, to me, a different issue. Particularly the boards of education. Why should they not pay 65% of the cost of collecting the tax and remitting it for them? Why should the City of Brampton, the Town of Caledon, the City of Mississauga lay out considerable sums of money for the Board of Education to collect their levy for them? I'm not suggesting there be 3 tax bills. I've never suggested that. But surely the Boards of Education and the Region Appeal should pay their share of the cost of the tax bill.
Madam Chairman, if I just make a point here that you've got the public maybe a bit confused with follow through what Mr. Whitehead has said. Just to clarify, all of us will collect the taxes, or even when we haven't fully collected the taxes, have to pay it to both the region and the Board of Education. Those people holding back their taxes are not doing anything by benefiting, and especially themselves, because they're being charged the percent, 1.5%. Plus the fact that's delaying the situation down the line. And I think that should be made clear to the public out there, because I think there is a misunderstanding that they think by holding back their taxes, they're punishing or showing a position to the Board of Education. It's costing them, once again, and us, at both the municipal and the regional area, additional expense. And there's a better way of expressing their concerns. Thank you for that opportunity.
Mr. Garrett, we'll try again.
Madam Chair, let me first start out by saying that not only am I the CAO, but I act as the Commissioner of Administration, and so the program that we're going to describe as quickly as we can late this afternoon to you is administration. And let me first start out by introducing to you the directors that we have in administration. First is Deb Troughton, who is the Regional Clerk and the Director of Administration. We have Kent Gillespie on my left, who is the Regional Solicitor, and Paul Vivian, who has just joined us as our Director of Human Resources. So that group, I think, if I haven't forgotten anyone, forms our team. I want to just go very quickly through what the administration department as such is broken down into, and if you can just have regard for the slide, it's really 4 functions. The first, as I say, is human resources. Second, the regional solicitor, the regional clerk's department, and the executive arm. Each of the directors are going to speak to their particular area, and I won't even dwell on what those functions are about because they'll cover that. But while I'm up here, I wanted to deal very quickly with the overall department and the executive arm itself. Most of the funding comes from internal charges, and in fees, which we've talked about already. Chargebacks to other areas. For instance, Kent Gillespie in legal charges fees for providing legal services to other departments such as Public Works. But there is a balance that is considered corporate that is covered off the property tax itself. The spending essentially goes primarily on salaries, but it also goes for a variety of goods and services and rents and contributions to reserves. Primarily, it's a staff-driven function with chargebacks. Now, if I can just turn to the executive arm itself, that is that element of the administration department consists of the council and chairman's operation and the operation of my office, the CAO's office. And collectively, our job is to implement council's direction, to ensure that council's direction in terms of recommendations, resolutions, and bylaws are implemented, to carry out strategic planning for the organization, to have a view to the longer-term future and making sure that our programs and policies are in accord with the long-term direction the council wants to take, to manage the corporation in terms of its performance, to ensure that it is run as effectively and as efficiently as it can. The chairman's office particularly has prime responsibility for community relations and spends a great deal of time in liaising with community groups and other members of the public at large and the public in Peel specifically. One of the major functions that I have as CAO is the allocation of financial and human resources and deploying those to the areas of highest priority, both in response to the demands of council, but also in response to efficiency opportunities when they arise. And last but not least, because, as I've explained earlier, we are a highly leveraged outfit, the region of Peel, intergovernmental relations both at the area municipal level and the provincial level and even sometimes the federal level, as Paul Vezin explained this morning, in the case of immigration, is a very important part of the function of the executive wing. The funding for the executive arm is about $1,450,000, and most of it, about 80% of it, is a charge to the property taxpayer. There is some proportion that is charged back to the sewer and water operation and put on user fees, and that was an issue that was raised earlier, and Louise answered that. To the extent that a proportion of the service provided by council and the CAO's office is for the purposes of serving the sewer and water function, that is charged back to the utility rate. Our spending is, again, primarily salaries and wages for the salaries and wages related to council and my office, and the services that we pay to different departments for the goods and services that we use, whether it's supplies or whether it's rent or whether it's microcomputers. A couple of key facts that we use as benchmarks in estimating the cost of the service that's provided by the executive arm. In servicing 21 councillors, a chairman, and he has a support staff of 2. The cost is $1.29 per capita. My office has a staff of 6, including myself, and the cost per capita is about 61 cents. So those are indicators that we use to determine approximately the level of service that we're providing, and we can show change from year to year in that regard. Now, I want to next call on who is it now? I think it's Kent Gillespie to give us a quick overview of the regional solicitor's function.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm Kent Gillespie. I'm the regional solicitor, and I'd like to talk to you this afternoon about the office of the regional solicitor. This is the first year that both legal services and realty services have been combined in the office of the regional solicitor, and as such we have 2 of the best loved professions in our division, lawyers and real estate agents. I recently heard that they're no longer using white rats for scientific experiments. They're using lawyers and real estate agents. There's 2 reasons for this. First of all, there's more of them. Secondly, the scientists don't become as attached to them as they did to the rats. Let's move on to the services and programs. We have the lights. Okay, just here. Okay. There we go. We have the 2 sections, legal services and realty services, and to give you some examples of what we do in legal services, you'll see the word litigation, and that includes appearances in both courts and tribunals. For example, if an industry dumps, say, toxic waste into the sewer, we prosecute those offenders. If say, a restaurant doesn't meet health standards, we provide legal counsel in the prosecutions in that regard. If the region perhaps doesn't get paid for a charge or a fee or on a contract, we sue, and sometimes we sue successfully even. This year, for example, we recovered about $300,000 from an insurance company that was reluctant to pay a claim. For example, construction claims, if they arise in the course of the region's business, we also act on behalf of both the region and Peel Nonprofit Housing Corporation in that regard. We've had a couple of those this year. We got an award of $200,000 in one favor, and we settled another one that resulted in a savings of about $1 million. Besides courts, we have many tribunals that we represent the region in front of. If the region were to deny welfare to a claimant who isn't entitled to welfare, we represent the region at the Social Assistance Review Board. If a developer doesn't comply with the regional requirements, we would represent the region at the OMB, and that's the Ontario Municipal Board. And if land is needed for a capital works project that we cannot buy, we conduct the expropriation and settle the compensation payable to the owner. We also deal with environmental boards, Human Rights Commission, and other boards and tribunals. For example, even this year we represented the Peel Nonprofit Housing Corporation at a coroner's inquest regarding the death of a young child at one of those complexes. We also provide corporate counsel services, and that's mainly involves advice on provincial and federal law, and everything from procedures at council meetings to environmental matters, freedom of information, finance, purchasing. And as everyone knows, there are more and more changes to law coming along every day, and we have to keep up with those. We draft contracts and agreements, bylaws, letters, opinions, and provide a myriad of other services to the corporation. In the real estate and construction part of the service in legal services, we basically have two areas. We complete all real estate transactions on behalf of the region for property bought and sold. And we also provide advice and draft contracts and documents for construction projects for roads, water and sewer projects, buildings, and we also assist Peel Nonprofit Housing Corporation on their projects for nonprofit housing. And we provide a lot of services in connection with advice on the tender process and the region's rights and obligations under various contracts. On the realty services side, the main service provided there is the acquisition of land for capital works projects. The region has quite an aggressive program in that regard, and we acquire all those little parcels of land that are required for road widenings, sewer and water projects, and we have about 500 parcels to acquire in the next couple of years. And about 90% of the Realty Services section's time is spent in that regard. We also get involved with leasing, and we negotiate and renew leases for office space and facilities required for regional programs. For example, social service, welfare offices, health department, district offices, police facilities when they require those properties, and the headquarters buildings and public works. The last function in realty services is land inventory management, and that involves keeping records of all the land owned by the region and managing property which is not being occupied currently by operating departments, and managing sale or disposal of surplus land. The key facts that are relevant to our division deal with the distribution of our services among various clients. Our client is really the regional corporation, and it takes a number of forms. We have council itself and the various departments. We have boards and agencies such as Peel Nonprofit Housing Corporation, the police. The bulk of our services provided to the Public Works Department in relation to capital works projects as one item. A large amount of service deals with waste management, for example, the Britannia landfill extension or lift. We deal with development applications and litigation arising out of that, and provide advice on and prosecutions in respect of the sewer use bylaw. The next major client that we have is what we've called administration and finance. It involves the clerk's office, council, on matters relating to regional council and legislative matters. The human resources division provides services regarding employment and labor law. The treasury and finance function involving services in respect of utility accounts, purchasing, finance, and development charges. You'll note that under planning and housing, that includes Peel Nonprofit, and we have a fairly special relationship with Peel Nonprofit in as much as we do a lot of work for them on their development side. They also manage regional headquarters properties, and we are involved with them in as much as we act on the acquisition and disposal of real property. Now, you'll note that the 18 employees in this division, of the 18, 5 are on contract, and that's mainly because there is a large capital program component, and currently there's a great volume of work in that area. If the program needs were reduced, we could then reduce the numbers of contract staff and reduce the overall staffing. The service levels have been divided between legal services and realty services because there are two indicators there. There are 4 lawyers in legal services, including myself, and we've set a billable hour target of 5,200 hours, and that's 1,300 hours for each lawyer per year. And it's usually exceeded, and this represents less than 85% of the total number of hours in the office, as it were, or at work. And the question comes up, what's a billable hour? Well, private law firms use the billable hours to measure and charge for services. Time spent on a particular task or file or doing work directly related to the task is what's involved in a billable hour. It doesn't include things like office management, continuing legal education, or staff meetings and those sorts of things. We try and operate in legal services like a private law firm. We set annual targets for billable hours to ensure value to the corporation. We set rates for services based on a budget cost, and it's obviously less than the private sector because we don't include a profit on that. But we do include the overhead for all our costs, so all our costs are included in the figure. The target reflects reasonable billable hours for employees. And we often hear of unreasonably high targets set in the private practice. And looking at some lawyers' bills, you'd think that they had no time to sleep or eat unless they work in their sleep. I'm reminded of the story of a lawyer finding themselves at the pearly gate, and they complained to St. Peter they shouldn't be there. And he said, I'm in perfect health and I'm far too young, I'm only 42. And St. Peter answered, that's strange, according to your billable hours, you're 102 years old. So we want to avoid the unreasonable situation that can occur. Realty services is driven by capital works program. And 90% of those services are for acquisitions of properties for capital projects. We have hundreds of parcels to buy or expropriate. And that 1992 rate or target that you see up there is really double the 1991 rate, and we will be hopefully trying to triple that rate in 1993. On funding, we can see the pie chart. It reflects really the charges to the clients to whom we provide services. Now, in that big part called internal, that includes, well, at least half of that is our charges to programs for services which receive provincial subsidies or are user pay services. For example, water rates, sewer rates, etc. The other half is charges to capital reserves in respect of capital works programs. There are no charges to property tax supported programs other than, well, let's say the internal charge component does not include any charges to property tax supported programs. And you'll see that in the other sector, property tax, and that represents services to that sector of the corporation that is supported by taxes. The reason that we charge provincially subsidized programs and user pay programs is that if we did not, the regional taxpayer would be subsidizing, in essence, the provincial government or the user of the service, which is something that we do not want to do. The other part of the funding from capital projects is really a direct cost of the project. If the service was not provided by us, it would be provided by some other, either outside lawyer or consultant at probably higher rates. And lastly, we have spending. You'll see that the figures there, 71%, 28%. It's actually more like 80%, 20% now, or should have been. What we did is we converted some consulting services that were under goods and services into contract employee services, and that would shift that slightly. And that is the summary of the offices of the regional solicitor. I'd like you to leave you with this thought, though, that there is no such thing as free legal advice. It's usually worth exactly what you pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. It is a pleasure for me to be here this afternoon and to speak to the Human Resource Department of the Region of Peel. We provide several services to our business units. We provide these services in partnership with our business units. We provide a service of employee development, which is training, productivity improvement. We do this through education. We do this based on a needs analysis. We do this also both with internal and external team leaders. We are responsible for the agreement renewal of our collective agreements. We have 7 collective agreements at the Region of Peel, all of which are due in 1993. We are responsible for the grievance and arbitration programs at the Region of Peel. The province of Ontario in Canada is one of the countries where the right to strike during a collective agreement is not in the jurisdiction. We have to provide consistent arguments and grievance settlement. We have about 10% of our grievances which go to arbitration. In the area of occupational health and safety, we really break down into 3 parts. One is workplace safety, making sure that all our workplaces are safe to work in. One is control of those accidents which do occur to ensure that the claims are actually justified. And the other area is to see to a prompt return to productive employment for those employees who are injured in the workplace. In the area of recruitment, we handle a full range of recruitment, everywhere from attraction to the job, to testing, to actually doing the hiring of the folks. Salary and administration benefits, administration, we ensure that all our pay systems are equitable, that people are paid commensurate with the responsibilities of the jobs that they perform. With respect to employment and pay equity, employment equity has been an active program at the region for several years. It has to be adjusted in 1993 because of the legislation that will come on board. We expect the legislation to be enacted mid-1993, and we'll have 18 months to put forward a program. With respect to pay equity, the region has several programs which are done, all of which, with the exception of one, is in effect. We have one bargaining unit who have us at the tribunal right now, and we would expect that that would be resolved sometime during 1993. With respect to the salaried staff, as you know, once a pay equity plan is posted, people have the opportunity or the right to, in fact, challenge that plan, and we have a group of the salaried people who have chosen to challenge the plan. We expect settlement of that in 1993. In the area of the number of full-time employees, there's exactly 2,065 full-time employees at the Region of Peel. 22.9% are in public works, 6.2% in housing, 8.6% in finance, 37.7% in social services, 1.8% in planning, 18.4% in health, and 4.4% in administration. Our expenses in a year are $2,410,922. of which 73.5% is charged back to the business units, 26.5% are not charged back. Those expenditures are spread out into goods and services, most of which are legal services, required, salary and wages, 39%, and reserves of 41.5%, which is workmen's compensation reserve. The Region of Peel has chosen to be self-insured in the area of workmen's compensation. Some key facts driving the human resource function. There are 2,400 employees altogether. 1,400 are non-unionized, and 1,000 approximately are unionized. There are 365 employees that are either part-time or on a contract basis. As I mentioned before, there are 7 bargaining units. We receive and administer and respond to 6,000 job applications a year. We hire about 210 people a year. Most of that hiring is done for social services. There are 245 compensable accidents throughout the region during the year, and we had 22 retirements last year. 66.6% of our staff are female, 2/3. 15% are of visible minority. The female salaries versus the male salaries are 89%. And there are 19 employees in the human resource area. Debbie, I think you... With respect to the allocation of human resource services, 17% of our budget is attributable to public works, 5.7% to housing, 5.8% to finance, 40% to social services, 0.2% to planning, 10.3% to health, 18.2% to police, and that is just the compensation reserves for their workmen's compensation fund, and 2.3% for administration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Debbie Troughton, the director of the Clerks Division. The services that are provided by our division, coming up on the screen now, are 4 main services: communication services, corporate secretariat and records management, heritage, and insurance and risk management. In the communications area, we provide support to the various departments in producing some of the major communications with our target audiences. We're largely in the business of education and communication as a region, and we do have a vital role to play in supporting that function across the departments. In addition, we do some issues management, where we're tracking issues to try and be in a state of preparedness with our target audiences. We do some media relations, those being our prime vehicle through which we can communicate with the residents and our other target audiences. And we also do a small community relations program in that area. Corporate Secretariat and Records Management provides a myriad of services to the organization. Primarily it serves committee and council in handling all the actions that come out of the variety of committee meetings and council meetings. We also provide the corporate secretariat function to Peel Nonprofit Housing Board, manage the region's policy and procedure manual, offer a corporate micro-processing service, which is a profit center for us, provide some legislative services, and for example, the drafting of bylaws, process the plans of subdivision and condominium on behalf of the organization, which involves coordinating the work of several departments, and process all of the agreements that the region enters into. The solicitor and I are the primary signing authorities, and all of the agreements that we enter into, which exceed around 500 a year, are processed through this division. In addition, we provide an inactive records management function to the corporation. We must keep records in accordance with our records retention bylaw, the terms of which keeping the records are documented in a number of acts. And we also provide the Freedom of Information service to the organization and to the public. In Heritage, many of you are familiar with our Heritage Complex, where we operate a museum, the Region's Art Gallery, an archival reading room, which is the repository for the records of the area municipalities, the school boards, and the Children's Aid Society in the region. And we also deliver the insurance and risk management program for the police, Peel Nonprofit, and the regional corporation. In terms of our funding, 53.7% is property tax base. Once again, as you've heard from the Finance Department and both Paul and Kent, we exist to serve other departments, and hence we charge for not all of our services, but to the tune of 40% of our services, charged back across the departments, some of which are property tax supported, subsidy supported, and against capital, and also the utility and rate programs. In addition, we recover some money externally from users, for example, of our subscription service for the committee and council agendas, and for some sale of photographs at the archives facility, as well as for freedom of information and compliance letters, lawyers' letters. In addition, we receive a small amount of money, around $30,000 from the provincial government as a subsidy for offsetting some of the operating costs at the museum. In terms of our total spending, 47.3% goes to salary and wages, 42.1% to goods and services, including rent, microcharges, and other internal services, and 10.6% to reserves. We operate two reserves, the Insurance Rate Stabilization Reserve and the Heritage Building Reserve. As I mentioned earlier, we do exist to serve other departments and the public directly. As you can see in this slide, I've broken down the hours of service provided to some of our key clients. 37% of our time is spent in direct service to the public with the operation of the museum and with the communication function that we do play. The next largest audience falls into that category that Roy Wiseman mentioned earlier, services that we provide that we just can't logically charge against a particular department, so we've lumped them into what we call corporate. Council provide 8.5% of our time directly to serve council and the vital function that it plays, making sure that the actions that you take at every meeting are followed up on and communicated to the right people. And then you can see the breakdown of some of our key departments. We do service the police and Peel Nonprofit housing as well. Lastly, in terms of our service level, we are in the business of selling time and talent, and in our communications area, we provide over 10,000 hours of service a year in creative service to our various departments and key clients. You may be surprised to learn that you meet 105 or more times a year. On average, 108 action items come out of each of your meetings, which translates into direct activity or work in our division when we proceed to take action as you have specified. As I mentioned earlier, we do manage an inactive records center. We've got 12,000 cubic feet of records, and that amount is growing, as you heard this morning, with the activity in the social service area. We are taking on more and more records into that inactive records center. So it's imperative that we destroy on time and in accordance with our retention bylaws, because every cubic foot of space costs the organization and the taxpayers money. This year we will have received and processed 75 formal requests under the MFIPA, the Freedom of Information legislation. In addition to that, while this chart doesn't show it, we have processed over 200 informal requests as well. Paul Vivian, our Director of Human Resources, mentioned the new hires at the level of 210 and mentioned that largely they are in social services. We must train those people on an ongoing basis as to how to interpret and administer and treat personal information. Has a direct relationship on the programs that we deliver. In our insurance program, we receive on average 450 claims per year and process those. Not all of them, of course, we pay out on. Some of them we deny. and I report on that annually, as you know, to committee. In terms of our visitors at the Heritage Complex, this year we anticipate 28,000 visitors through that complex. It's a service that's used by residents in all 3 area municipalities and visitors to our region, as well as the school children. And it's a very worthwhile program, and one that we're very proud to provide to the residents of Peel. That is my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions of our staff? Okay, Councillor Holden.
I had one earlier with regards to the legal department, and mainly you referred to 5,200 hours, I think it was, Ken, and you gave some indications of that you were booking that out at cut rates compared to the legal profession. I just had a look at that, and having a son that's in that profession as a legal clerk, I know what they bill his hours out at. If one were to take 300 as an average, $300 against that, would I be right that that would be fair? Because what I'm trying to do is show to the public the fact that there's that accounts for, based on 5,200 hours, $1,500,000, which was in essence a good showing of how efficient, by having an internal staff handling things as against having to go outside all the time for services. So that's the reason I brought that up, and whether or not my figures are right. But I think it's a good story that the public should be aware of, because I endorse what you're doing, and I see a lot of efficient aspects of relationship to this, and most recently at the town of Caledon we have added an additional lawyer because we felt that it was a better way of doing things as well. I'd like your comments if you wouldn't mind.
As you know, Councillor Holden, the region uses the services of outside lawyers from time to time because, of course, we wouldn't want to staff up to the level where we would provide for all specialties. But what we do is we keep careful records of what we pay for those outside services. And we, every year, we look at, on average, what we're paying. And those bills include costs for lawyers at the higher rates, which are 300 and sometimes above, and some of them include a lot of student time and junior lawyer time. And we develop an average, and the average is around the $200 an hour mark. Our cost to the corporation is about $110 an hour, so there's $90 an hour saved right there. And if you multiply that by the 5,200, you've got significant savings to the corporation on legal services. That holds true from year to year. There is about a spread of about $90 to $100 between the outside service and the inside cost.
Thank you, Madam.
Councillor Whitehead.
Well, Madam Chairman, anybody that's sat wearily in front of the television all day and watched this process and has heard some fairly pointed discussions deserves a little story. I think that'll take a short time. I was reminded when Debbie talked about the volume of information that's in storage and the bylaw that has to be followed rigidly in order to destroy it as fast as you possibly can. It took over 100 years to store all the known written information in the ancient world in the Great Library of Alexandria, which was only about 3 times the size of this room, which burned down. And 2,500 years later, we're producing information at such a fantastic rate that we have to have rules and regulations that assure that people get rid of the information as soon as they possibly can so we don't become overwhelmed with it.
That's all?
That's
it?
That's your lesson for today.
I was waiting for a longer. Mr. Garrett, would you like to just say a few words at the end here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just like to say that if that is all the questions, that we've welcomed this opportunity to discuss our service levels, and if there are any other questions or areas that councilors or the public want to delve into further, we're more than happy to hear from them and explain various program areas, whether it's administration or any other program, in more detail. It's an opportunity for us to examine ourselves more carefully and respond to some of the questions, and all of the issues that have been raised here in the 2 days that we've met are very valid ones, and we will be dealing with those over the near term rather than the long term. Thank you for the opportunity of doing this.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor Bissell. I just want to say a thank you to the City of Brampton for allowing us the opportunity to use their beautiful council chambers here with their fine equipment in it to bring to the public, to our residents, sort of a cross-section of our budget with the level of services that we tried to provide, and sort of in a summary way, really, the dollars that are spent in these. Over the next 3 or 4 months, we will of course be getting into the numbers after they're brought forward by our chief administrator, and hopefully in that area that we will again notify the public and the ratepayer groups that we have on the list, or anybody that is on the list, of the dates that we will be dealing with that. And again, it'll be an open process, and hope that they'll have an opportunity to join us if they so wish.
Madam Chair, could I just add one other thing? I forgot to thank Deb Trouton and her communications staff, who put a lot of effort into putting these slides together. I said to Louise that you'll probably never want to look at another pie chart again, so we already have plans to have the next presentation in histograms.
At this time, I'd like to thank the 2 cable companies for their time today, and to indicate to anybody at home who does have any more questions that the Budget Committee is willing to listen to you at any time, and that this process is going to be an open one right through the whole budget process. My name is Lorna Bissell. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Budget Committee, and I'd like to thank you for watching today, and I hope we were informative. Thank you, and good night.